Welcome to Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Weldin. Today's story is called The Cat and the Fox, an adaptation of an Aesop's fable written for you by Daniel Hinds. Thanks! Enjoy the episode! The Cat and the Fox. Once upon a time, a cat named George was walking in the woods. She was small and wild, with frizzy gray hair and a dancing tail. Crowning her curious little head were tall ears that ended in small, pointed tufts. She had never had an owner and never wanted one. George, a name she had chosen herself, thank you very much, just liked to wander the woods and eat up little mice and shrews and, if we're being honest, even some bugs, but only when no one was looking. It could be tough in the woods for a wild cat, but George's tall ears weren't just for show. She could hear everything that creaked or crawled or shambled or slid. She could tell the crunkly crinkle of a delicious mouse from the slinky slither of a hungry snake. The mouse got pounced on, but the snake? Well, George had a surefire move for anything dangerous. She was an excellent climber, and when something spooked her, she would shoot up a tree like a squirrel after a nut. It was a simple trick, but it always worked. Up in the branches, George was safe. Safe from the snakes and the cougars, and safe most of all from the coyotes. Ooh, the coyotes! Even thinking about them made the hair on George's tail puff like a pine cone and her back bend like a bow. They were lean and hungry, with pale yellow eyes like dying leaves and jutting jaws that drooled when they ate. They loved to snatch up wild cats when they could. So George was always on alert for the crafty canines. One day, she was walking in a field of golden grass. The wind wove it in waves that reminded George of the ocean, but without all that nasty water. It was a peaceful morning, and she was chattering a little to herself as she hunted. I like my ears, I like my fur, yes, I do. Sometimes I hiss, sometimes I purr, yes, I do. She rolled over a log and quickly munched a few beetles. They weren't as good as mice, but they were easier to find. I like my whiskers long and pale, yes, I do. I like my toe beans and my tail, yes, I do. Oh! The sound cut through the forest like a chainsaw. George's tall ears twitched and turned. Her back went up and her tail got puffed and she froze. Oh! Ruff, ruff! Coyotes! George said, and she took off running. The field was good for grub, but there was no place at all to hide. She barreled through bushes and darted over dirt and tore towards the trees. As she did, she passed a fox who was also digging in the dirt after a buggy breakfast. "Whoa," said the fox, her eyes going wide. "What's wrong?" "Coyotes, coming this way!" The fox turned and started running alongside George. Behind them, the howls grew closer. "You look scared. What are you gonna do?" asked the fox. She had a wide and wild grin, her whiskers waving. "Just gotta get to the woods," said George. "We can climb a tree. That'll keep us safe." "Climbing a tree?" asked the fox. "But isn't that like a little basic? I would never." "What do you mean?" asked the cat, leaping over a log. "Coyotes can't climb. It always works." "Well, sure, it works," said the fox. "But it sounds boring. Do you really only have one trick?" "Who cares about tricks?" George said. "All I care about is staying safe." "Well, I care about tricks," said the fox, both of them still running towards the trees. "I have so many tricks. I can outsmart a coyote 100 different ways." "Well, good for you," said George, getting annoyed now. She had never much cared for people who bragged and bragged, or people who were rude for no reason, and the fox was definitely both. Well, I'll be glad if you stay safe. Well, since you asked. But I didn't ask. Your eyes asked, said the fox. And since they asked, I'll tell you some of my best tricks. I have the mossy molly, where I cover myself with moss and pretend that I'm a rock. And then I have the classic double corkscrew loop around, where I backtrack over my own trail and get their sniffers in a knot. Fascinating, said George. But I'll stick with climbing a tree. Then, of course, there's the spider tui banana, where I slide left and then do a super sneaky trick to the other side. Okay, now isn't the time! As they ran, they passed a hedgehog. He saw them barreling by and called out in a shout. What's got you two so spooked? Coyote's coming, said George without breaking her stride. The hedgehog yelped and rolled himself into a little ball, all bristling with spikes. Ugh, another uninspired animal, said the fox. One trick. Coyote coming? Curl in a spiky ball. Human hunters? Curl in a spiky ball. Grumpy morning? Curl in a spiky ball. Well, if it works, said George. I'm surrounded by basic, boring blockheads, said the fox. I'm going to show you a little razzmatazz. I'm going to show you why I have that wow factor and you never will. George just shook her head. They had reached the trees and just in time, because the coyotes were close now. She could hear their howls and barks and yips just behind. She could imagine their long snouts all full of teeth and dripping with drool. Suit yourself, she said, and she leapt up a towering oak tree. Her claws dug into the bark and she scrambled straight up the wide trunk. In a moment, she was nestled in a crook where the branches spread apart, safe and sound and way off the ground. Boring, called the fox, and she spun around a tree. From her high perch, George could see the coyotes coming now. They were grizzled and gray and looked hungry enough to eat a cat, or a fox, or just about anything else for that matter. Listen, they're almost here, she said. Fox, just climb up here with me where it's safe. Like I'd ever just sit in a tree, said the fox. I have 100 tricks, and I'm the smartest, most clever forever animal you'll ever meet. Well, okay, then do something. Should I show you the backwards bobsled or the hurricane tortilla? The fox mused, sitting at the base of George's tree. Maybe the box-shot foxtrot. Now that one would blow your little mind. Ow! Called the coyotes, the scent of fox filling their sniffers now. Fox, just do anything! How about the southern dandy? Oh, or maybe you'd like to see the wavy plain gravy train. Just then, the coyotes launched into the woods. They saw the fox and lunged at her, snarling and slobbering. The fox yelped and darted away, so close her tawny red fur was showered with spit. Be careful! George shouted. She didn't care much for the rude, bragging fox, but she still didn't want her to get eaten. Just watch and learn, kitty cat. The fox dodged and turned and spun and churned, her fur a flash and her paws a pouncing. The coyotes kept nipping at her heels, quite literally, and George could see it was only a matter of time until they got her. Here comes the prestige, the fox shouted, and she shot under some roots and doubled back. The coyotes weren't fooled for a second, and one snapped its jaws just inches from the fox's twitching whiskers. Whoa, okay, that one didn't work. Just come up here with me, please, George called. Basic! Boring, said the fox. I've got some better tricks. She did a loop, dodged under one coyote, and then leapt over another, nearly landing in the jaws of a third. Watch out! Shouted George, watching all tense from the safety of her tree. Ugh, quiet little cat, okay. That one didn't work, just let me... Ah! A coyote chomped down on her tail with a growl. The fox managed to pull free, but the last inch of her puffy red tail was scraped bald, and the coyote had a mouthful of fur. "Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, no, no," the fox started chanting. She was panicking, turning this way and that, suddenly overwhelmed and lost in the trees. She tried a mossy molly. She tried a box-shot foxtrot. She tried a southern dandy, but nothing worked. In her desperation, she tried to get to a tree, but the coyotes blocked her way. In a second, she found herself stuck in the open, coyotes on all sides of her. They were baring their teeth, and she could see dinner bells flashing in their eyes. The fox gulped. She was all out of tricks. "Here!" called George. "Come up quick!" The cat threw down a brambly vine. It rolled off the tree and landed next to the fox in a heap. She grabbed it with her mouth and both paws and scampered up. The coyotes leapt after her, stomping and chomping, their jaws snapping shut just inches under her tail. "Climb quick!" the cat shouted. At the top, George grabbed the fox and hauled her onto the branch. The coyotes howled and whined below, but they couldn't climb, and soon they got frustrated and stalked off into the forest, looking for easier prey. Thanks for that," said the fox, still shaky. "No problem," said George, laughing a little in spite of herself. "So, all those tricks of yours..." The fox blushed deeply. Not that you could see it under all her wild, spit-flecked fur. "Yeah, I'm sorry for calling you boring and basic, and all of that, really. You were right. Sometimes you just need to do what works. I shouldn't have been such a show-off." "Oh, it's okay," said George. "I couldn't let you get eaten, though I thought about it for a minute." The fox looked at her with wide eyes, but George burst out laughing. "I'm kidding, I would never," she said. "Maybe you could show me a few tricks to use, just in case there are no trees around next time?" "It would be my pleasure," said the fox. "We can start with the bumbling tumblebub, or the goose's last caress, or the wings over my hammy, or, On and on she went, and George listened and laughed. She would stick to what worked, but it never hurt to have another friend, even if it was a fox that never stopped talking. The end. Thanks for listening.